Okay. Oh, that's loud, isn't it?
It's working everybody
up. Welcome to BCP Cabinet. I am chairing today in the absence of Vicky Slade, the leader. It's a wonderful, lovely day here in Christchurch. It's great to be here. I'd just like to hand over to Sarah to just do the necessary.
Good morning. Just to let you know, there are no planned fire drills this morning, so please leave near the nearest exit, which is at the rear of the room, should there be any fire drills. Thank you.
I've also already mentioned that we've had apologies from the leader. She's at a leaders' conference somewhere further north. And we also have apologies from Councillor Rice. Agenda item 2. Do we have any declarations of interest?
None received.
Okay. Agenda item 3. Confirmation of minutes. I'm going to be proposing these minutes. Do we have a seconder?
Yep, I'm happy to second.
I've got rather a long statement to read here. I would ask the Cabinet to confirm the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record. I would also ask the Cabinet to note that there were 2 further recommendations of the Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting on the 4th of October, which were not originally recorded in the minutes, as follows. The Overview and Scrutiny Board resolved that interim arrangements be brought forward as a matter of urgency to access the current SIL fund. The Cabinet commits to work closely with the Overview and Scrutiny Board as future arrangements are developed on this issue. I am delighted to be able to respond to the first recommendation and advise that we have now set up the process for addressing the current SIL neighbourhood portions. The Bournemouth meeting is scheduled for next week. A meeting for Poole is being convened for the new year, and the Christchurch funds are being passed to the relevant parish and town councils. In response to the second recommendation, the Cabinet shall of course work closely with the Overview and Scrutiny Board as future arrangements are being developed. A report is to be brought to Cabinet in January 2020, and the contributions from Overview and Scrutiny Board will be welcome. To ensure that future recommendations from Overview and Scrutiny Board, are captured, could I ask that a standing item be included by Democratic Services officers on the agenda for all future Cabinet meetings? I would also ask the Cabinet to support the Leader's request to the Audit and Governance Committee's Working Party, which is reviewing the Constitution, to work out a longer-term process for the Cabinet to consider recommendations for Cabinet that are outside of the current Cabinet agenda and to build that into the Council's Constitution. Is that agreeable to everyone? We just have a show of hands. Yeah, excellent. Now we move on to agenda item 4, which is public issues. Mr. Forte, would you like to make your statement?
Yeah, I'm often reminded of a quote from Mark Twain. He said, "The more I get to know people, the more I love my dogs." So, very true. And at the Overview and Scrutiny Board on Monday, I also made a quote from that great philosopher Winnie the Pooh about me being a bear with a very small brain. The reason I'm making this very short statement is because I need to synthesize issues. This is the issue of 5G. I know you're not discussing it today. And there's been an awful lot, as you know, but better than I do, an awful lot of evidence presented to you and also the Overboard and Scrutiny Board. So I need to cut through it, and this is the thing that is important to me. So first of all, thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity. If you cannot answer these 2 questions positively, I suggest that the only option is to apply the precautionary principle and call a moratorium on the BCP 5G rollout. So do I sufficiently understand the components that fall under the umbrella marketing term 5G and what each of those elements offers over and above currently available technology. And secondly, in the absence globally and locally of an independent environmental impact assessment, am I satisfied that this new technology is safe to roll out in BCP, where I'm tasked with the guardianship of the best interests of citizens and their surroundings? And that's it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Exactly 100 words as well. I'm really proud. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. The next statement is from Mr. Michael Hancock of Community Alliance's Pool. He's not able to attend, so the Chief Executive is going to read it out.
Thank you, Chair. Statement from Michael Hancock, Community Alliances in Poole. I applaud that the combined homelessness and rough sleeping action plan is before Cabinet today. I am, however, concerned that the voice of those with direct lived experience is absent from the Homelessness Reduction Board, or that a lived experience subgroup is not evident in the action plan to enable those with lived experience to have a direct input into the co-design of services. A good example is the Leeds Poverty Commission. I would ask that members consider an amendment to the action plan to include the formation of this subgroup or a specific direction to officers that this issue be addressed in the strategic review.
Thank you, Graham. Now, the next statement is from Mrs. Susan Chapman. If you'd like to come forward, Sue.
Thank you. Good morning. The sacrifices of previous generations have just been acknowledged. For our tomorrow, they gave their today. Unfortunately, this generation is taking our children's tomorrow for our today. Decarbonisation needs to happen almost overnight. 2050 is too late. Today's item 8, BCP's plan and all our plans, need updating. A cleaner, sustainable future is being undermined by fossil fuel addiction and public confusion. Last week's report of untold suffering and accelerating climate damage from 11,000 scientists from 153 countries should be part of any planning documents. The response to my question at the Flood Advisory Group on 30th of January remains unanswered. Thank you.
And finally, we have a statement from John Hartley from Unison. Is John here? Yep.
Hello. I'm just making this statement on behalf of Unison members. Unison have serious concerns about the transformation programme, the engagement of consultants and the impact on staff and service users from increased use of digital technology, bringing all services under one hub and the loss of up to 15% of the current staffing complement. We call on the Council, as an employer of choice, to ensure that Unison, as one of the recognised trade unions, is fully involved from pre-design through to implementation, so that the best outcomes can be achieved for the employer, the staff and the local community.
Thank you very much. Now we move on to the main items of business on the agenda. How we will do this is that the proposer and seconders will just point out who they are. Then we will ask Councillor Broadhead to comment, or any other relevant heads of the scrutiny committees that may be in attendance, and then other members, and then we will move to a discussion. So I think if we can move over to Councillor Wilson for the first item. This is the homelessness and rough sleeping action plan.
Cheers, thank you. So I'm just going to quickly introduce the report and then move the recommendations, and hopefully I'll have a seconder. This is the Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Action Plan. It's required by legislation that all local authorities have to update their action plans by winter of 2019, so that's what we're here doing. It's kind of an interim piece of work as we kind of move towards a new homelessness strategy in 2020. The report outlines what we intend to do about rough sleeping and homelessness, whilst also recognising many of the achievements that have already come before. So it is recommended that Cabinet notes and approves the Homelessness Rough Sleeping Action Plan. Cabinet supports the development of a new homelessness strategy in 2020 to be brought forward to consideration to Cabinet following a full review and consultation period. So I would like to move that recommendation, and hopefully I have a seconder.
Yeah, I'm happy to second those recommendations.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome to the Chair for the first time. Yes, we had a good and robust discussion about this at the Overview and Scrutiny Board. We have no formal recommendations to make, mainly because the Board was largely very supportive of the efforts and the ideas behind what is put forward in this initial action plan. It was good to note the work that has been done today. Particular reference was made to Seascape Homes and Property, which has, I think to date, looked at put over 100 families moved them from B&B into more secure long-term rental, and it was very pleasing to hear the Cabinet member commit to a further expansion of that programme, which seems to have made a dramatic difference over the last few years on this. We also explored the difference between what was the EPIC board and the new Homelessness Reduction Board, and was satisfied that that's a step in the right direction as well. Again, working on a lot of the good work that's happened across all the towns and preceding authorities, and continuing to build on this very important issue. So it was very welcomed by the Board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any members that wish to speak on this item? Okay. Shall we go to a debate? Does anybody in the Cabinet wish to speak on this item? Councillor Hadley.
Yeah, I just it would be valuable to think about the point that was raised by Mike Hancock around people with lived experience and how we can engage them in development of the strategy going forwards.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I think the portfolio holder for housing in introducing this sort of underplays his role in it a bit. That actually, although it does say, all local authorities are required to have these plans, it's not a case of we're only doing this because the government tell us we've got to have a plan. And I know from conversations with the Cabinet member of Housing that he's quite passionate about this area, and this is an area that the whole Cabinet are sort of committed to, and the Cabinet member is certainly sort of working hard to make sure we do whatever we can. And I certainly know a number of us around the Cabinet table have had experiences of working with homeless people who are rough sleeping or homeless, or working out on the streets and speaking to people, and actually there's a number of us who've got a pretty decent understanding of the lived experiences of people sleeping rough and struggling with being near homeless, etc. So I just want to emphasise that this isn't just we've got to have a strategy because the government tell us we've got to have a strategy. We actually believe that we need to really seriously be doing something about this over the next few years to change the lives of those people who are rough sleeping, and change the life chances of those people who struggle with homelessness.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, shall we move to the vote? Those in favour?
It's unanimous.
Okay, excellent. We'll move on to the next item, which is number 6, consultation on school admissions arrangements 2021-22 and the relevant consultation area. Councillor Moore, would you like to introduce this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, this paper asks to start a 6-week statutory consultation on admission arrangements for schools for which the local authority is the legal admission authority. This actually only affects 1 maintained primary school in Poole and 5 in Christchurch, and Appendix 4 refers to the schools in question. The paper makes specific reference to 1 Poole school because Poole had agreed a different way of measuring distances, etc., than schools in Bournemouth and Christchurch. This agreement involved all Poole schools, and the new BCP authority will continue with that arrangement for another year so as to maintain the stability for parents and schools. Later, there will have to be a wider and more fundamental discussion on admission arrangements, and this will take place across BCP involving all schools. Regarding the relevant area, following consultation, and the results of that are in Appendix 1, the scheme proposed for the 2021 entry year is very similar to that set by the preceding authorities. The full outcome of this particular consultation will be brought before Cabinet for a decision in January 2020. And I ask for approval of the recommendations as set out. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Yeah, Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Happy to second.
Okay. Do we have the chair of the Children's Committee here to say anything? I don't think so. Councillor Broadhead, do you have anything to say on this matter? Do we have any members here who would like to speak? No? Okay. Do we have any Cabinet members that would like to speak? Okay. All right. Let's move straight to the vote. Those in favour?
Unanimous.
Okay, thank you. We move on to the next item, agenda item 7, BCP Corporate Parenting Strategy. This is again Councillor Moore. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm sure I don't have to remind members that we are all corporate parents, that we take our responsibility seriously and are involved in making good decisions for all our children in care and care-experienced young people. Care experience is the preferred term now for care leavers. We have now established a BCP Corporate Parenting Board, which I chair, and Councillor White is vice chair. And membership includes the children in our care and care-experienced young people. This corporate parenting strategy was created with young people's full participation and sets out our ambition for our children in care and care-experienced young people, together with how this will be achieved. Members of Children's Overview and Scrutiny will also ask for their comments, and the full strategy is attached. Our predecessor councils all had strategies and policies for children in care and care-experienced young people, and our new BCP strategy has been based on and developed from these existing strategies. And these strategies have also been appended. The new BCP strategy is, I think, aspirational and ambitious and aims to create brighter futures for our children and care-experienced young people. I ask you to support the recommendations as set out. The strategy will then go to the next meeting of Children's Overview and Scrutiny and will also need to be adopted by Council. Thank you.
Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Brown?
Yes, Chair, happy to second that.
Okay. Councillor Broadhead? No. Do we have any members that would like to speak on this matter? No? Okay. It's open to the Cabinet. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. As is my way, actually, for many years, actually, when these usually come before full council, I note the strategy is for adoption by full council. But I just wanted to add to what my colleague had said, that I think this strategy that we update each year is a really critical one, because these are sort of children and young people that we are responsible for their upbringing and the outcomes that, and their life chances, really. I spent many years as a foster carer in Poole and Southampton, looking after a lot of young people who faced extraordinary challenges in their lives. And I just wanted to sort of place on record as well, as part of this strategy, that we really need to bear in mind the work of all of our officers, all of our social workers, right across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, and all of the foster carers and the independent carers that we use to work with these young people. They really do have to put their heart and soul into this work, and they face incredible challenges, and I think we really do need to remember that, and we do need to note it and note our thanks to them for the work they do with these young people. So yeah, definitely wholeheartedly support the strategy.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to say something? Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I think this is like a really important report. When I first got elected as councillor, I don't think I realised the responsibility that we hold as councillors to be corporate parents. Parent at 23. It's really a vital thing that we're doing, and having in the early parts of this new council forming, had a lot of contact with some of the care leavers. They're very bright, intelligent young people who have aspirations, and like I think it's really important that we keep that in mind as well going forward. That there's nothing different about these people. They're incredible people who we need to support in all that we can, and we need to put them at the forefront of everything we do. So, just like to welcome the report, really.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else? I would just like to say that this is a great report. It's a responsibility that all councillors have to look after our children in care, and I am particularly concerned myself with the transition stage from being in care to adulthood, because most people have parents that help that transition, and we need to make sure that we are giving our children in care the kind of support they need to make that transition into adulthood. Okay, if we move to the vote, please can we show?
Unanimous.
Okay, excellent. Again. Agenda item 8, organisational development design outcomes. This is one of the leaders within the leaders portfolio, so I will summarise it, propose it. Essentially, this report relates to the work that is ongoing to transform the council's delivery of services. There was a 3-stage process identified and which is being implemented. The first was to create the new unitary authorities. The second stage was to transition safely to that having 2 authorities, and the third stage was to design and build a new organisation. We're just at the starting point of that third stage. KPMG have been instructed and are helping us to develop a system for working. They've helped us develop an operating model, and which is explained in some detail in the company report and in their actual report. Essentially, there's the possibility to save between £22 million and £36 million a year by transforming the way we deliver services, and there'll be an initial cost, one-off cost of between 20 million and 29 million estimated for that. As part of this, it's anticipated that the core back office services will be delivered from a single hub, and then there will be face-to-face services delivered from offices or some kind of facility in communities, which are, along spokes. It has not been decided where the council hub would be, whether that could be in an existing building or it could be in a new building, and it's proposed to create a working group to try and bottom that out. And the leader has invited the leader of the opposition to participate in that working group. I think the final thing I'd like to say is that it is anticipated that there could be between 421 and 624 job roles lost as part of this process. But it is anticipated, given that the council is currently running at a 10% turnover of staff, that most of that would be accommodated through that natural turnover. In referring to the Unison statement earlier, we of course want to work very closely with Unison and other interested parties to make sure that this transition happens as smoothly as possible and with as little distress to employees as possible. Okay. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Phipps.
I don't think I need to say any more. You've set it out very well, and I'd like to second the proposal. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Broughton.
Thank you very much, Chair. This did occupy a little bit of time at the Overview and Scrutiny Board a couple of days ago, although many of the comments were positive, and indeed I was reminded by Mr Oscathorpe before the meeting that we couldn't be too critical because I'd signed off a lot of this work to start with, so I've got to pick the bits which I'm only joking. But broadly, we all know that this was coming. Part of the aspiration for LGR was savings, number one, but secondly, a new way of doing things, particularly a smart and digital way of creating a new council. And you have to start somewhere, and the first bit of work obviously was inevitable. Much of the discussion at the Overview and Scrutiny Board did centre around this idea of a central hub, and we did question the leader on some of the principles behind that. The leader did obviously express that this would be subject to the Cabinet Working Group that was proposed to come up with a final decision, although she did give some indications of what she would like to see, and particularly around the fact that a new building might not be the best way to go. There was also some discussions about the implications of that central hub and, of course, what that will mean for democracy. The KPMG report talks about smart ways of working and highlights the building that we're in as an exemplar of that. But, of course, the leader said that this building is probably not big enough and probably would be one of the casualties. But, obviously, that will be subject to a further piece of work coming forward. The only other point was that there was a little bit of confusion of how this process was developed. On the one hand, as you'd said earlier on, Chair, there was a comment that this was developed together with KPMG, but on the other hand, the leader was suggesting that this was a bit more of a hands-off approach, and it was a KPMG piece of work for Cabinet's consideration and approval. So we delved into that a little bit more. And the only other comment that we made around the job losses was that there are currently two pieces of work. This piece of work where we talk about possible job losses in the council, and the pay and reward strategy. The leader did reiterate that they are two separate pieces of work, and in many circumstances that seems quite right. Having said that, if you are coming up with a new way of working that has job implications, and you have a new way of working on a pay and reward which has job implications, it would seem sensible to try and bring those two pieces of work closer together in the future. But as I said at the beginning, broadly positive. This is something that we all recognise needs to happen, and if we want to realise not only the cost benefits of LGR, but actually the benefits to people, ways of working, and to all of our residents, then we need to push this as much as we can. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other members that would like to speak? No? Okay. I just wonder if the Chief Executive would like to say a few words about the process from the officer's perspective, because I think that would be informative.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, it's clearly going to be a hugely challenging process, and there's two stages, I think, to local government reorganisation from the inception of the new council. One is bringing the services together, and that's often about picking the best of the existing three, or in some cases setting a higher standard than any of the three services are. The next stage then is how can we drive the council to be more efficient, more effective, provide better services in the community, make sure we're providing much stronger support and diverting our resources to the people that need that support, whilst enabling other people to access services in the most simple way and the most efficient way. I think what we're trying to do here is to look at that second phase and say, how can we really make a difference? How can we make the council as modern and efficient as it can be, whilst providing, at the heart of the corporate strategy which was agreed by the council, vibrant communities with outstanding quality of life where everyone plays an active role. And that's the balance that we're trying to achieve, and to do that within some pretty tight financial constraints. So my sense is what Julian and his team are leading through the offices is a real rethink of how do we do that to best effect, how do we do that as efficiently as possible, and how do we deliver great quality services to our communities within the financial constraints and in the best way that we can. So I think this will be a challenging agenda. It will be a 3 or 4 year agenda, a long-term agenda of change, and particularly if you look at things like a hub location, that's going to be a 3 or 4 year plan. It's not going to be an instant decision to move somewhere and then get it right. We have to get the environment right, we have to get the culture right, and we have to get the service delivery right for all of our communities.
Thank you. Would any Cabinet members like to comment on this? Councillor Devon.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I should have asked initially, are we being videoed? Because Christchurch does that. We're not. No cameras, okay, so I don't need to smile then. Sorry. No. What I wanted... Yes, okay. What I'm interested in this report, apart from the whole of it, which I think is good, and I'm really pleased about the bits where they do on a page, because I think that's very helpful, but I'm really pleased about the acknowledgement with the spokes from this hub that there will be a chance for people to visit a spoke or somewhere and have a face-to-face discussion, because we've been through this in Christchurch when we merged with East Dorset, we didn't merge, I'm sorry, when we joined with East Dorset, that we lost a lot of the contact with customers, what are we calling them, citizens. And I really think that this particular bit needs to be really stressed, that we are going to have the capability. However, I'm also very pleased that a lot more will be done by telephone or by internet, because I think that's the way we're going, and I think it's excellent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Moore?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I agree with what my colleagues just said, and I think it's important that we continue to listen to our residents, to hear and to understand what they're telling us. And I think we need to make sure that there are local bases, local facilities, so residents can continue to pay their bills and talk to someone who can help them. But at the same time, we also need to fully embrace technology, so other residents can do everything they want online without the need to speak to anyone if they don't want to. For me, it's inspiring that we're on this journey to transform this new council. And I do feel excited and pleased to be part of it all, but it's also a bit scary. It's also really, really challenging. I'm really grateful for the support of my colleagues and for the skill of officers to help deliver this. But I'm happy to support the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to sort of thank the officers that have been involved with this, because I know there was a lot of work has gone into this whole sort of consideration of the organisation design, a lot of discussions, a lot of meetings, a lot of working with KPMG, and I know all of ourselves have been involved in that as well. And like my colleague said, there's some big decisions we're going to need to be making, and it's scary to an extent. But what I wanted to note is also the unison statement that we've had at the start of today's meeting, and the statement that's been sent to us as cabinet members. And I think that's a really useful, it's a sort of checks and balances, isn't it? That we know that we need to do this, but we do really need to keep at the forefront of our minds the impact this will have on the staff that are delivering those services to our residents. And unison, as the voice of those staff, we need to really listen carefully to the points that they're making. And I've read through the statement that they've sent us, and there's a few bits in there that actually we do need to really keep in our mind, and we need to ask questions in our discussions with the officers as this programme moves forward. So I just wanted to thank Unison for those comments, and that we will be keeping those in mind.
Thank you. Councillor Hadley?
Yes, thank you. I guess a couple of things for me, and one is around ambition and realism and that balance, and trying to make sure that we are ambitious about our role as a much larger authority than the three preceding authorities, but importantly that we invest in our staff and take our staff with us on that journey, and that's key from the statement from Unison. It for me is about co-production. We talked earlier about co-production with the homeless, but something about our staff are our biggest asset within the authority in dealing with the public. One of the real opportunities that the Internet First approach takes is 24/7 access for the citizen, and that should be something that hopefully will give us an ability to improve the citizen who may be wanting our support at times when we're not here. But I'm slightly worried about the optimism bias in the report, and it's going to take probably 3 years for the benefits to start coming through, and what we can do to make sure we're getting some early wins. So some of the stuff around estate rationalisation, around improving the sustainability of the estate, which obviously is something else that's really important to us. But I'm also very keen on building capacity and on in terms of making sure that it's not just about KPMG doing unto us, but it's ensuring we are building the transformation capacity on an ongoing basis, because this is going to be a long haul project. It's going to actually probably be 5 to 10 years before the new organisation has really got to that place, because that place is moving. The whole bit about how people are using technology and going forwards. And then the other thing was around partnership working in terms of obviously the ICS, the integrated care system, with health partners and with Dorset Council, the opportunities that we might have to do things in common with Dorset Council, because a lot of the digital stuff, it doesn't have to physically be in any of our buildings actually. I think we've all experienced the call centres that are remote and know nothing about where we are, and we certainly don't want to go there. But there are some things that we should be looking to what we can do in partnership with others in a similar vein, and also making sure that we're tied into the national agenda, things like gov.uk, the opportunities to make sure the user experience is seamless with other things elsewhere. So those are all key. And I guess the other bit that I didn't really quite see was around how we build our capacity around things like strategic developments, our ability to make sure that we're in a place to apply for bids, to bid for funds, and have project funded teams. And make sure that we're not denuding that capacity as we look to reduce headcount. We've got to make sure that we are also able to take advantage of opportunities as they arise, and perhaps look to project-based funding for some of our staff that we need that ongoing capacity to make the system work. I very much welcome it, and I appreciate it's a big long journey that we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I'd just like to say something to add some balance to the comment of the leader that Councillor Broadhead referred to. I think it's important, this is with regard to the new hub, wherever that may be. I think it's really important that we look at it within the working group as to make the right decision and not be influenced by the perceptions of how certain members of the public might jump and say we shouldn't have a new building because that's ridiculously expensive. There may be good reasons for a new building. I am the portfolio holder for regeneration. We have a lot of staff who located somewhere else could give a boost to regeneration. I'm sure if Councillor Rice was here, she would extol the potential benefits of a new sustainable building. But clearly there are advantages as well of using an existing building. So we need just to make sure within the working group and consequently within Cabinet and Council that we make the right decision. Okay, if we move to the vote, please could I ask members to show?
Unanimous.
Okay, great. Now we move on to agenda item 9, Q2 Budget Monitoring Report 2019-20, and Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. The Q2 Budget Monitoring Report for 2019-20. Just as a brief introduction, the purpose of this report is to present the Council's performance against budget for the period 1st April 2019 to 30th of September 2019. And in summary, the General Fund revenue projected outturn for 2019-20 is a pressure within services net expenditure of £4.5 million. The most significant element of these is the £3 million pressure in the Children's Services Directorate, which includes a higher number of children in care cases inherited from Christchurch than was previously anticipated, a general increase in children in care numbers compared to the budget, and an increase in the numbers of special educational needs pupils entitled to school transport. So the position for this second quarter is an improvement of £500,000 on the position as reported a couple of months ago in the first quarter report. The report emphasises that at this stage in the financial year, the forecast is just a projection and the deficit has not yet occurred. So positive management action can prevent the full level of this position from materialising. The report also sets out as appendices the reports from the 4 corporate directors in respect of the background to the pressures in their service areas and the mitigation strategies that they've put in place to enable a balanced or better budget as a financial outturn to be achieved. This £4.5 million service pressure will, though, not result in a deficit, as additional resources were allowed for within the overall budget approved by the BCP Shadow Authority in February of this year to manage the greater than normal level of uncertainty in this first year of the new BCP Council. These additional resources are detailed in the report. There's a £2.5 million base budget contingency designed to cover ongoing pressures not recognised or foreseen in service budgets, and there's a £6.5 million service-specific financial resilience earmarked reserves designed to enable the services to manage any one-off emerging issues as they strive to deliver the seamless transfer of services. So, Chair, the report also provides detailed and transparent information on the forecast use of Council's earmarked reserves, its capital investment programme and its housing revenue accounts. And can I specifically highlight that the report requests Cabinet's approval of a £653,000 scheme to deliver 3 new affordable housing units at Barrow Drive, with financing which includes £327,000 of prudential borrowing. And it also seeks Cabinet approval of an additional £357,000 expenditure on the development phase of the Our Museum Rediscovering Pools Maritime Heritage Project, based on a further grant from the National Lottery. And the report also requests Council approval of a £2.4 million Environmental Innovation Hub project at Durley Chine, funded by a grant from the Coastal Communities Grant Fund. And further, I'd just like to add, Chair, that following the Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting on Monday, and also conversations I've been having over the last week or two with my colleague, the Cabinet Member for Children's Services, I would like to add an additional recommendation to the report that we've got there. So we've got recommendations A to E. I'd like to add a recommendation F, and I can give the wording in a minute, but I'll just read it through. It requests that the Corporate Director for Children's Services sets out in the 2019-20 Budget Monitoring Report for the third quarter the budget variances within the Directorate and the actions being taken to bring the budget into balance. This includes variances within the high needs block of the Dedicated Schools Grant and the actions being taken to address this deficit. And in speaking with my colleague, we just felt that that's an area, particularly there is a report here from the Director of Children's Services, but because there's ongoing pressures within that area and there's ongoing pressures within the high needs block and the Dedicated Schools Grant, it's something we really need to be constantly kept appraised of, and particularly the actions that are being taken to address those issues. So I'd like to move the recommendations in the report and that additional recommendation.
Thank you. And we need a seconder for the original. Do we now need a seconder for the recommendation as well? So with the same, yeah. So Councillor Moore for both. Okay, Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, very welcome the additional recommendation. It was explored in the Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting, the particular pressure that we are facing at the moment within the Children's Services Directorate of circa £3 million projected deficit, which is, of course, the most concerning thing at the time. We're very fortunate to have the Chair of the Children's Services Committee, Councillor Burton, at our board meeting on Monday as well, and the board did ask and agree that as chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Board, that I liaise with Councillor Burton to ensure that the Director of Children's Services will continue to provide an exception report for the variances on the budgets in that directorate, and it's pleasing to see that formalised today. As we progress with further budget monitoring work and also further budget scrutiny work, I'm sure that will come into play as well. But obviously that is an area of particular concern, as it is across many councils in the country. It's very useful to hear some explanation from Councillor Brown as to the reasons for that, and it's perhaps not unexpected. We did also explore in the meeting as well that there are other reasons as well. It seems that some of the work to mitigate that, particularly through the change in the department, hasn't come to fruition, so hopefully that can progress as well to help with that as well. So that is very welcome, and that was a recommendation that I was going to bring, a comment that I was going to bring today as well. A couple of other points from the meeting on Monday. Again, this is always a work in progress, and it seems like we are heading in the right direction. There were some comments around item number 23 in the report, around the still administrative receipts, a combined revenue benefit of 300,000. there were some comments about how that has come about, and the Section 151 officer explained that it was allowable to use some of the SIL receipts to administer the scheme. There were some comments that just because it's allowable to use the funds that should be used for SIL to fill the accounting hole doesn't mean you should, but of course there are reasonings behind that. There was another point which actually wasn't raised in the meeting, which I will raise, which is around 26, which is a pressure reducing. The pressure relating to seafront has reduced to only 1,000 because essentially we push the pressure into the future. And I don't know whether the Cabinet member would like to make some comment on that. It doesn't seem to be dealing with the issue to just push it to the future, but maybe there's a plan behind that. And then finally, it was also very positive to hear that the income from the Council's investments in the investment strategy are performing better than expected as well. But overall, that things do seem to be heading in the right direction, and it was a very useful part of the meeting on Monday. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any members that would like to speak? No? Okay. Cabinet? Does anybody wish to speak? Councillor Moore?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was very happy to support the recommendation. Obviously, Children's Services is a need-led service, but we clearly have to keep an eye on the budget. And can I also mention the DSG and high needs block? I would welcome the paper going to Children's Overview and Scrutiny. I had actually already asked the Chair to facilitate that. I've also asked for a paper to come to Cabinet so we can have a deep dive session on it. And I think it's important that members understand these budgets and in particular the background behind them. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just responding to the points that were raised. Yes, I'm glad that the Overview and Scrutiny Board support our proposal about keeping an eye and asking for a further report back about the deficits and pressures within the Children's Services Directorate. Community infrastructure levy, yeah, that was discussed at a reasonable length within the Overview and Scrutiny Board, and yes, there is a sort of revenue, additional sort of revenue within the report because of the way we're administering the community infrastructure levy. Those contributions from developers, it is allowable to use a percentage of those to cover the administration costs of running community infrastructure levy scheme. And those can be quite significant in my experience. You know, it's not just a case of, oh yeah, you've built this property, it's got this square footage, we'll send you out an invoice for this amount of money that you need to contribute as a developer towards infrastructure within the area to mitigate the impacts of your development. Developers are often slow in paying those community infrastructure payments, and there can be quite an administrative burden in chasing them, reminding them, and even threatening legal action, and even threatening charges on the properties before we can actually squeeze the money out of some developers. I'm not saying that's all, but certainly I know, you know, it gets close to legal proceedings and court proceedings and charges on properties before we can get that. There's quite a burden and quite a staffing number to pursue those legitimate contributions from developers and ensure that we collect the monies which are due to us to improve the infrastructure for local residents to mitigate the impact of those developments. So I think it's reasonable that we do take an administrative charge from those community infrastructure levy payments because it can be quite a burdensome job to actually carry out. And thirdly, point 26, where it talks about the pressure relating to seafronts reduced from it's about 120,000 to 1,000 now. Yes, it's partly due to a change in the commencement date of the pool seafront development, pushing the pressure into the future, but that's, 55,000. Trading on the seafront has reduced that pressure as well. We've had good trading on the seafront, better than what was budgeted, and that's actually reduced the pressure within that area by £65,000. So it's a bit of both. It is part of changing dates around the seafront strategy, but it is also largely because actually we've had a good trading season on the seafront.
Thank you. Anybody? Councillor Allison.
So I just want to add and clarify to that. So I think the issue with this point 26 is that the phrase pushing the pressure into the future is very poorly phrased. It's not actually pushing the cost of something that we're having this year into next year. It's because the commencement date of the project is in next year and therefore the financial implications are in the next financial year. So I think it's entirely appropriate that the date is moved and that the savings are made appropriate to that.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments? No, in that case we'll... Oh, sorry, Councillor Dedman.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, it's only a comment, really, on Appendix C, I think it is, the report from the Director of Adult Social Care, which you've all read, obviously, and is an interesting report. But I just wanted to say that I think my colleague said something about staffing and administration, that there has been a tremendous amount of administrative work with the mosaic systems not gelling, if that's a technical term, and but also the disaggregation from Dorset, which has caused huge amounts of officer work and hair tearing. And I really would like everybody to note that has been, I think, in layman's terms, a nightmare. I mean, it's really been a work of art to try to get anything running. So I think, and in the report, the director quite naturally sort of skims over it, but it has been a huge task for the directorate. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, let's move to the vote. I guess we need 2 votes here. So,
Just the Chairman.
Is it okay? Yeah, but not. We don't have to vote on the amendment first.
No, it's the recommendations are as proposed by Councillor Brown.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So, if we could show.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. We move on to agenda item 10, corporate performance management update. This is one of the leaders' items, so I will again introduce it. Essentially, this is about the introduction of a performance indicator matrix. We have a system which is very common, being introduced of red, amber, green banding. What it does is give a snapshot in time of the health of the organisation. Shouldn't be seen as a measure of success of the organisation. It's more of a guidance mechanism, a help along the way, and it can flag issues that need to be looked at. And I think each council had its own form of doing this prior to the merger, but now they've been brought together into a coordinated single system, and it is in its very early stages. This report is an overview to the end of September 2019, and the leader invited Overview and Scrutiny Board to suggest other indicators that they might think appropriate, and indeed if any cabinet member or any member of the council would like to suggest some indicators, they would be welcome. Okay, so I have a seconder for that report. Councillor Moore. Yeah, okay. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll be brief on this one. Many of those that have been involved in some capacity in preceding authorities will understand the value of having these performance monitoring reports, not just because they give a snapshot of how well you're doing, but they quite often give a very good early indication of areas that need further focus, and can give you awareness of looming issues as well. We were very positive about this, and equally positive about the leaders' comments about getting involved in this and suggesting different areas that we may want to be looking at in the future, not just because it helps us as a scrutiny board to scrutinise, but also as we develop a further work plan of areas that we may want to take further interest in which aren't directly related just to the cabinet forward plan or just to cabinet items that we're considering. Again, it will give us a steer of different areas where we may be able to add some value as well. And again, in the meeting itself, those of us that have been involved with similar performance related updates in the past already gave some useful ideas of things that we found useful in terms of monitoring in the past. So happy to be involved in this in the future. It's a very good idea. The only caveat I made to the leader, who is extremely keen on these, is that sometimes be careful what you wish for. And secondly, just to make sure that you don't do them for the sake of doing them, that there is some resource in preparing these, particularly at this stage where things aren't as joined up with the bringing together of the authorities as we may like. And again, we suggested that as the new operating model comes into fruition, it would be a very useful way of trying to automate as many of these as possible, because if you can get more real-time updates and, more importantly, use as little resource as possible to find out this information, it means that you can concentrate resources on where they should be, which is to improve things. So happy to be involved in this in the future, and I imagine it will become a standing item on the board in future meetings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any members that would like to speak? No. Okay. To Cabinet? Do we have anybody? Councillor Hadley?
Yeah, I was just tying that last comment from Councillor Broadhead, which I heartily agree with, to the paper we had for, with the KPMG work. You know, we need to be much more data and intelligence driven, and to make sure that is as much as we can automated and coming out the back of the operational system, so that it's not creating a burden for staff to do that, and spotting the right trends as well.
Anybody else? Okay, I'd just like to see, just picking up on Councillor Broadhead's point, that we do need to look at these indicators to see if any of them are pointless, essentially, and we need to take them out. We don't want redundant ones just hanging in there, and it's just going to create a cost to the council. Okay, if we can move to the vote. Those in favour? Yes. Okay, good. Agenda item 11, adoption of Bournemouth, Christchurch, Poole and Dorset waste plan. Over to Councillor Phipps.
Thank you, Chairman. Right, hopefully these won't be too difficult. These are this one and the next one, which is the minerals plan, are legacy items being dealt with by all previous councils within Dorset and Bournemouth and Poole. And obviously Christchurch was in the Dorset area at that time. They've been about 5 years in preparation. So the waste plan, as far as BCP is concerned, deals with 3 areas or 3 facilities. One of them is at Eco at Parley in the Christchurch area, which is an existing waste management facility, and they have identified opportunities for intensification, including management of residual non-hazardous waste, as black bin waste. The second one is at Canford Magna in Poole, which is basically a ditto. It's an existing facility, and there's opportunity there for intensification of that. And the third is Mannings Heath at Poole, where that site has been assessed for the potential to manage up to 100,000 tonnes of residual waste there. We're looking at all of them at the opportunities for energy from waste facilities, which of course is very environmentally friendly and certainly the way forward. So basically that is what is in this waste plan as far as the BCP area is concerned. There's one thing I'd like to, before I propose the recommendation, I would just like to change B of this recommendation in the waste plan. I don't want to take you on to the minerals plan yet, but B of the minerals plan includes BCP and Dorset councils. We need to change B because it's actually incorrect, I believe. It should say, confirms that the formal adoption date will begin 2 weeks from the date both BCP Council and Dorset Council have resolved to adopt the plan. And that is exactly what it says in the minerals one. And I've spotted that, so are we happy to do that? Because obviously both unitaries have got to agree it.
So I think that's right. I think it's the second of the 2 councils that agrees that should trigger the adoption process.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and if you look at the minerals one, which is on page 247, it does state that, and this one is exactly the same, except I think that B has been written incorrectly on the waste one.
Is there any other officer?
I'm sure I'm right.
I think that's right. I think if we can adopt that amendment to the recommendation, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Phipps. A seconder?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Very happy to second. Very good report.
Yeah, Councillor Devon. Okay, Councillor Broadhead, do you have no comments from there? Any comments from members? Okay, from Cabinet? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking on a lot more items than I anticipated today, but I wanted to be a bit parochial actually about my ward and on the waste plan where it talked about in set 8, the land at Camford Bagner in Poole, which is, as my colleague said, it's an existing waste management complex within the borough. As a ward councillor, I've had occasion to visit the site a number of times and toured around it. And the report talks about opportunities for intensification and redevelopment of the site, including the management of non-hazardous waste. I know, within the local area there will be some people who will be concerned about any intensification of operations there, but certainly in my experience over many years, we've had a landfill site there and we've had these waste management site alongside that. It causes very little disturbance to residents within the area. It's a very well managed facility. Vehicle movements don't cause any significant issues along Magna Road and in that area. And to be frank, actually we create the waste within this conurbation. I think it's only a responsible thing to do that. Actually, we deal with it and process it within the conurbation. We don't just ship it out somewhere else into a rural area to be dealt with. I think it's, especially the transport costs and the environmental impact of that. My experience of this site is that they do some incredible work there in terms of generating energy from the methane that comes from the former landfill site and managing commercial waste as well. Just one simple example that I was given a couple of years ago was that when the RNLI redeveloped their boat sheds down in Poole Town Centre, they demolished a number of buildings there to design a whole new boat building facility generating a lot of jobs. Now, the materials that were demolished there were shipped to the Camford Magna facility. All that concrete and material was crushed to form new aggregates, and the aggregates were then shipped back to the site to build the new facility. Now, that's the circular sort of recycling of those facilities is fantastic in my view, and a lot of the stuff that goes on there is really useful, really environmentally aware, and it's a well-managed facility, so I'm quite pleased with the report, and I'll support my colleague in recommending it.
Okay, thank you for that rather long contribution. It was most welcome because it allowed the Chief Executive to check whether Dorset had adopted the plan already, which they have. So I think the actual original recommendation was correct.
Okay, well, in that case it says resolved. I think it says resolves or something, isn't it? We should do. So on B at the moment we've got confirms the former adoption date within 2 weeks from the date council resolved. Be resolved as
I think we could compromise on deleting the D and replacing it with an S. That would be fine. Yes. So I think just to be clear, so Dorset Council have adopted it, subject to our council adopting it. You're right. If that reads from the date council resolves, because it still has to go to full council in December. If the council then resolves it, then it's 2 weeks after that will be implemented.
Okay, so I'm recommending it or proposing it based on.
Yes. Does anybody else have any? Yeah, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to balance the over-exuberance about how eco-friendly this is. We really need to reduce our waste, and this is an important way of dealing with the waste that arises, but it's much better not to be producing it in the first place. And also, well-run facilities are environmentally great, but burning stuff we do need to be careful about, and there's the sorts of technologies that are actually developed on Camford Heath and used elsewhere are great in terms of paralysing the waste and actually doing it in a way that is satisfactory in terms of what goes out the chimney. And the other element of that, obviously, is it does reduce the shipping of stuff around the place. I guess in intensification, we also, it's important we cover our own waste, but perhaps that we're not shipping it in from a very large area. So, in some places in Sweden, they're struggling to find enough waste to feed their incinerators because they've got so good at their recycling. So it's trying to make sure that is an appropriate balance. Thank you.
Anybody else? No. Let's go to the vote. Please show.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. The last main item on the agenda is the adoption of Bournemouth, Christchurch, Poole and Dorset Minerals Sites Plan. Again, over to Councillor Phipps.
Thank you. Well, again, 5 years in preparation, legacy of previous councils. 2 sites which are retained in this plan from our area. One is White's Pit at Poole, where they do a very good job of recycling aggregates. Absolutely excellent. So it means buildings that are demolished or the rubble, etc., is all recycled and it's reused for bases in roads and all sorts of things. And that one, it is proposed that at the moment the facility is operating under temporary permission. It's proposed that it continues to produce this aggregate recycling. That's the first one. And the second one is the sand and gravel extraction site at Roshot in Christchurch. It's 74 hectares, and the proposal is for 3.5 million tonnes of sand and gravel to come out of there in due course. It adjoins at the Hampshire Roshot site, which will be extracted first. They will not be extracted at the same time. So this is like the second site at Roshot once the Hampshire site is dealt with. So those are the 2. As far as I'm aware, then, the recommendation at B, because that actually does mention both councils, so I'm assuming Dorset hadn't adopted this one yet. But providing the recommendation is agreed as correct by the Chief Executive, I'm happy to propose it.
Thank you.
With my newly found skills on Google, I cannot confirm that they have. I think they haven't yet adopted it, and therefore this recommendation is right. Yes.
Okay, a seconder, Councillor Moore. Councillor Broadhead, do you have anything? Any other member? Cabinet? Any comments? This is debate. Sorry, I'm speeding up a little.
Yes.
Councillor Devlin.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I've been through all this almost with the people that were putting it together, and I just feel I must say that on the Roshot site, on page 256, item 4, the transport and access. Speaking as a representation of people in this area, it says the area is subject to traffic congestion. Well, that's an understatement. And I'm really very, very happy that it does say that a transport assessment will be required. And I think that's something to really, really put in the forefront, because that particular bit, it says that access will be in Hampshire, yes, but we don't know where they go after that. And this has been something that has been discussed at Christchurch and in Dorset for over the years that it's been put together, and there's been no real satisfactory answer. So I'm very keen that we'll keep that in mind, that it has got to be kept under observation. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Phipps.
I'll just come back on that and say, yes, I'm very aware of this situation, and certainly in Christchurch we made a lot of representations about the traffic issue. Of course, the Hampshire site is going to be extracted first, and we had no control at all, really. We did make representations at the time, but no control over Hampshire, and they now have the access and egress in Hampshire. And that will continue to be used for the Dorset site when it comes forward. However, you're absolutely right, when they get out onto the roads, it is a free-for-all as to where the aggregate is required to go, and some of it will undoubtedly be coming up the A35 through Christchurch. But the transport assessment is important. We'll just have to see where it goes. But we are fully aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, let's move to the vote.
Unanimous.
Okay, the final item is the agenda item 13, Cabinet Forward Plan, which was published, I think, on the 15th of October. We have, as a consequence of the Overview and Scrutiny Board's review of the 5G situation that occurred a few days ago, the Cabinet will be responding, we anticipate, within the 2 months in January. In terms of Councillor Broadhead, would you like to talk at all about the recommendations that the committee made at this point? Well, it makes sense now, I think, really. Because the only other thing, I'll take advice on that.
Cabinet members are just asked to note the forward plan, so I can't anticipate there would be a great debate. The forward plan will be published again later on this week, where the new version will be appearing on the Council's website.
The only other thing to say is that it's anticipated that the December meeting of Cabinet will be moved to the 20th of December. But I don't think we need to formally agree that here, or do we?
No formal agreement is required at the meeting, although it would be an ideal opportunity to let as many people know as possible of the change of the date, and we can obviously minute it and publish it accordingly.
Okay, does anybody have any comments on the forward plan and the changes? No? Well, let's approve it then. That was a bit of a lead, but anyway. Councillor Broadhead, would you like to say something now? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'll be bringing the recommendations from the Scrutiny Board, and we appreciate that now will be a standing item for any that aren't related to the particular items of Cabinet, which is very welcome. Before I do, if I may just comment on the change in date of Cabinet to the 20th, which is very close to Christmas, so there better be mince pies. It does make it, and we've expressed this with the Chief Executive, quite difficult for the Overview and Scrutiny Board, because we only have, I think, 4 working days between Cabinet papers being released and Cabinet to do our board meeting. By moving it to that date, I think that's also the week that full council is taking place, which further limits our ability to have a meeting in that week with it really limits us for dates. A suggestion that I may well make, perhaps to take away, Chair, is whether there is any leeway for this meeting to publish the Cabinet papers maybe the week earlier. If Cabinet was due to be the previous week anyway, that would enable me not to have to move the predetermined date of the Overview and Scrutiny Board, so that we could have that the week before. So perhaps something to consider, because otherwise it does mean moving dates for the Overview and Scrutiny Board again, which is very, very difficult, as we've established. So just I was going to raise that by email later, but perhaps something to consider if possible. So moving to the recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board around 5G connectivity, as the Cabinet will be aware, we undertook a call for evidence around 5G connectivity, which is something that is very new to this Council. It is part of best practice within what the Centre for Public Scrutiny are saying now for emerging issues like this within scrutiny. I'm also really pleased to announce that we are being held up as an exemplar with how we're doing the new scrutiny system by the Centre for Public Scrutiny, which is, I think, great news for the whole Council, and I've been asked to speak at their annual conference in December. So we're obviously doing something right, so this is new, but I think it has been a very useful exercise. A quick reminder of how we've undertaken this call for evidence. We've had 2 meetings. The first one, which was very much listening, and we invited verbal evidence from residents, from public groups, from businesses around the issues of 5G connectivity. And the second meeting, which we had on Monday at 2 p.m, was the board considering and exploring those issues in further detail and bringing forward any recommendations to both Cabinet or elsewhere based on the evidence that we received on issues that we thought may require some further look. We also received written evidence within that time period as well, and I'm pleased to report we had over 220 written responses from residents, community groups, businesses, etc., which once again I think goes to demonstrate the real strength of feeling, and this is a very important issue to a large proportion of our residents. We did explore a number of the items and evidence that was put to us at Monday's meeting in a detailed way, going through the different sectors and themes that were raised one by one, and some recommendations have come out of that. So I'll go through the recommendations that have come forward. The first one is around planning. There are planning implications for the implementation of 5G technology. Gosh, try saying that after a glass of wine. Which are quite stark, and I think in many ways there was a degree of concern that in an effort to progress this technology as quick as possible, because in many ways it may be argued that the country is slightly behind compared to others, it has limited the amount of public engagement that can take place through the planning process, particularly with regards to new masts and things. So a lot more can go through under permitted development, and there is a more streamlined planning process for new masts as well. That did concern a number of residents. It concerned a number of members of the board as well. So the board resolved to put a recommendation that Cabinet be asked to consider equitable ways to involve the public more in the consultation around the planning implications of the implementation of 5G technology, particularly with regards to siting of masts. And I think the spirit behind that is that although there are statutory ways that we can involve the public within the planning implications of this coming forward, we can go above and beyond as well, and it is obviously a very pressing issue. So for Cabinet to consider what further consultation we may want to do with the public around particularly around new masts, because it's always a very, very emotive issue. The second recommendation talks about some of the health implications, and the health concerns formed a huge weight of the response that we got particularly from residents and concerned community groups. There is, of course, not much that we can do as a council regarding the implementation of 5G technology, particularly in the private sector. However, we do have a very unique position in the council. As the chair has referred to, there is a forthcoming Cabinet paper regarding the Lansdowne digital pilot of 5G technology, which is quite unique because in that circumstance this is not an outside body launching 5G. This is actually the council itself being the 5G provider for this test bed. And that does mean that we have a little bit more control than we may do if Vodafone or EE launched the technology as well. So we explored that in some detail at the board, and long story short, I think the feeling was if we do have a more hands-on role, because we are the provider of this 5G technology, it should be incumbent upon us to make sure that the health implications of that, where possible, particularly around the monitoring of the radio wave emissions, do fall within what are the internationally accepted limits. So the recommendation that came through from the board is that if Cabinet is minded to approve the deployment by the Council of 5G connectivity as part of the Lansdowne digital pilot, that continuous monitoring takes place to ensure that the levels of radio wave emissions fall within the internationally recognised limits, and that the findings be reported back to the Overview and Scrutiny Board. And again, it will be for Cabinet to decide how that process happens. Moving on, again with the health issues, I was very, very pleased to have excellent officer support at the meeting from both Ruth and Adrian, from more of the engineering and the economy side, but also most notably from Sam Crowe, who is the Director of Public Health for the whole of Dorset, who has a statutory role to give us the best advice on health implications, particularly around public health, and did a great job of responding to a number of the concerns from residents at the meeting. Again, we are very much guided by the guidelines that come forward from Public Health England, but Sam did agree to look through the evidence that had been provided, the 220 written and email evidence that had come in, and to pass that any pertinent parts of that through to Public Health England on the realisation that sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So that's the spirit of this recommendation, which is that the board agrees that all information submitted in its call for evidence in relation to 5G connectivity be passed to Public Health England to consider for inclusion in future reviews. And then further to that, a framework be established for feedback to be provided to the Council in whatever way we feel necessary in relation to the call for evidence information passed to Public Health England. And again, the spirit of that recommendation is that if we have passed anything that has influenced the debate in future, it would be nice to hear that has been taken in and what has been done with that. The only further non-recommendation but thing that we've been asked to pass through to Cabinet is that on behalf of the Board to request that Cabinet, through the Council, contacts other local authorities with regard to their work in this area, including those that have agreed to be government-funded testbed areas and those that have declared a moratorium. And actually, a further suggestion that has actually come through officers, we've had a lot of interest in the process that we followed, particularly through this call for evidence as well. And so it may well be worth using the processes and the evidence that we've learned to share our process with others that are facing the public interest in this issue as well. So I understand that this is being presented today and answers will come back later. I'm also completely comfortable with the fact that some of these recommendations are very likely to feed into further Cabinet items, particularly the Lansdowne one, and more than happy for it to be addressed within that item as well. But overall, I think a very worthwhile process. I do think that the public feel that they have been listened to, and hopefully that we've responded. And now I'll pass it over to Cabinet. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. With regard to your first point about the short time between Overview and Scrutiny Board and Cabinet, as I've said in the past, it's unacceptable going forward. We need to have enough time as a Cabinet to properly consider the recommendations of Overview and Scrutiny. So I'd like to ask the Chief Executive to look into how this can be achieved. I think there's some difficulty in moving, from previous discussion, in moving the meetings further apart. So in that case, the solution is for officers to aim to deliver their reports at the Overview and Scrutiny, not the one immediately before Cabinet, the one previous to that. And we mustn't allow the office corps to think it's acceptable just to leave it to the last minute. So I'd be grateful if you could look into that. Okay, I've just got the Miss Councillor Butler. You would like to speak?
Yes, it was really just coming back on the overview and scrutiny of 5G. I attended the meeting the other evening, and I'd like to put this statement forward, if that's okay with the chairman.
Yes, well, this will be considered at a Cabinet meeting in January, but if your statement is short, I'm happy for you to say it now.
Okay. Yeah. The rollout of 5G would affect everyone. Blanket coverage with no individual opt-out. If BCP Council are truly concerned about the health of the environment and humans, the precautionary principle is needed to identify health hazards of 5G prior to any installation or activation. This would require BCP Council to listen and take note of eminent scientists from various countries, note the actual effects experienced in places already running 5G on insects, animals, plants and humans, and prepare a baseline health record of residents now, listing present levels of 3G, 4G radio frequency radiation. Also to seek consent from residents and seek opinions of full council.
Thank you very much. Perhaps you could provide a copy to Sarah so she could properly reference it in the minutes.
Thank you very much.
Are we, Councillor Farquhar?
Thank you very much, Chair. I know this is a little bit out of sorts, but if I don't raise it just now, then I will no doubt forget. One of the concerns which perhaps wasn't brought before the ONS, specifically that raised the reason for the suggestion that this authority reaches out to other authorities that have, excuse me, declared a moratorium or actually are funded by the government as 5G testbeds, is that under new NPPF guidance, is that the ability for an authority to declare a moratorium is closed to them in respect to private providers of 5G. This is the principle behind my raising it as perhaps a recommendation to actually reach out to other authorities. And I echo Councillor Butler's comments here, is that if national policy is such that it is limiting a local authority's ability to safeguard its citizens and its residents from potential harm, then it's beholden upon that local authority to reach out to others that are already test-bedding 5G to ensure that their residents have been consulted appropriately, that they are, for want of a hyperbole, being used as guinea pigs when the technology has not been proven safe. And this brings us back to Mike Court's statement at the start. It's beholden upon us as an authority to answer those two questions. Do we understand enough about all the elements that make up the 5G technology? And more importantly, have we got empirical evidence that it is actually safe not only to humans, but also to plant life, animal life, and the environment itself? Having declared an environmental and ecological emergency, then it's beholden upon us as a council to make sure that we reach out and we gather as much information as we possibly can for those locations that are already implementing 5G and how they have consulted with their residents. Thank you very much, Chair.
Don't know what that's supposed to be. Yeah, I think there was some allusion to this within the recommendations, but thank you for expanding on that, Councillor Farquhar. Okay. Spotted anybody else? No. Okay. I'll now close the meeting. Thank you very much for attending. It's still sunny out there, and we are delivering you out of here half an hour early. So why not go and wander into Christchurch and spend some money, have a well-being time out. Thank you.